Hey everybody, once again it's EZL here. I'm back with another video. This time I'm going to do somewhat of a deep dive into the effects that are available to you in the SP404 Mark II. And so with this video I'm going to go into each effect. I'm going to talk about the menu in each of them, as well as give you an example of what it might sound like with a beat idea that I have here. And so if there's a specific effect that you want to hear along the timeline here, I have like a time code to where you can just skip to it if you want to, or if you want to watch the whole video, I'd appreciate it greatly. But that's what we're doing today. So let's get into it. All right, so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into the FX here. I have an example of a beat idea that I have that I'm going to use to kind of show off examples of each effects and how they can affect an instrumental or just like a sample that you're using. So the sample that I have here, I'm going to go into my pattern, and this is it. So that's the pattern there. So I'm going to let this loop, or actually I'm going to stop it. So the first effect that we have here is filter plus drive. Which what filter plus drive does, it's basically it can cut out certain frequencies and add distortion to your sample. So we'll do that. This is what it sounds like without anything, but then you see how it can filter out, and it gave it kind of like a somewhat of a maybe like a high pass, low pass, one of those things. One of the options with this effect that you have is you can mess with cutoff, which is control number 1, which is right here. And that basically is where you want to cut off which type of frequencies you want off, right? So the higher I go, the more kind of takes out that low end. And then if you go low, it takes out the high end there. Besides cutoff, you have resonance, which if I mess with that, that kind of just adjusts the filter's resonance level. The next one you have drive, which is basically your distortion. So if I go back to 1, 0 here, you hear that? That's the drive, which is adding distortion to the beat. To the second menu, to get to the second menu of this, you're just going to hold down the enter key. Make sure that you have the first menu up, hold it down, and you have FL type, low frequency, low gain. And FL type just stands for filter type. So you can have LPF, and then you can also have HPF, which is for a high pass filter, and then of course LPF is low pass filter. So what low frequency does, the next option here, it basically just adjusts the frequency range that is boosted, or it can be cut by the low gain option. And so going to the low gain, all you're doing is adjusting the amount of boost / cut applied to that frequency range from here. So if you mess with it, let's say I go to the low end, that brings it in. But if you go low, it can take out a frequency because I'm on low pass filter, so it'll go through there. And then you can get to just like mess around with it, boosting certain frequencies, or maybe you only want to filter out something from the sample, you know, just for like a certain period of time, and that'll do that. So that's the first one on the list, filter drive. So the next option that we have here is Resonator, which sits right there. And what Resonator does, it lets you alter a sound with what's called a maximum of 6 resonators that match different keys or different chords. And so I'll play this by itself and then throw in Resonator. Mess with the brightness. So I can change the root note to add something else. So the root note is just basically what kind of key you want it in. So this sets the reference pitch, basically the root note. So I can change it whatever I want it to. Then you have brightness, which just adjusts the tonal brightness of that. Then you have feedback, which is basically, you know, how much you're going to hear. So for example, I have this going. That's at the top. So that just messes with how much feedback you're going to get. The second menu, by holding down enter, you're going to hit chord. There's chord, panning, and envelope mode. And chord just kind of sets the notes to like maybe how you want it to sound, like M7. You have M5, might be like major 7 for the capital M. Lowercase m usually means minor, if I remember correctly. Apologize if I don't. And so you can kind of change it into what type of chord you want it to be. And then panning, of course, sets the excuse me, the pan for like where you want it, to the left, to the right, in the middle. Envelope mode allows you to increase the amount of feedback according to the input level. So like you can mess with it. Like, let me try to mess with this real quick. Kind of, you know, just the amount of feedback you're gonna get from it. Because when I have it 100, of course, it's at full 100%, and you can hear the presence a little bit. But then the more that you take it down, you know, you kind of lose it. You lose that effect. So that's Resonator. So the next option that we have here below is called sync delay, or delay for short. And basically, of course, if you're familiar with production or anything like that, this is just to give an echo effect in sync with the tempo. So this is another one that I have. That's a little beat. Throw delay on. So what I can do with this is you have time, feedback, and level. Time is just basically, you know, how often you want the delays to hit, or where you want them to hit. Feedback is basically how much of the delay you're hearing. And then you have level, which is the level of it. So the level is like, the feedback is how much it kind of like sits there when whatever's, you know, it's delaying is delayed, if that makes sense. And the level is the level is how loud it is. So the louder I turn it up, but then you turn it down. So you know how much of a presence you want that delay in there. And then the second menu here, you have L damp and H damp. And what that is, it's just setting the frequency range at which you want attenuated for the delay repeats. So like, if you want only the certain parts of the delay, like the low end or you know, the high end, you can fix that to where the delay will only include whichever frequencies you want, or what type of range you want it to hit. So that's delay. The next option that we have here is called Isolator, and it starts right there. And so if I do this, you know, no effect yet. Isolator, what it does, it basically lets you cut off sounds in a specific type of frequency range. So if I click it, if by listening, you can hear that it's cut out that low end, a little bit of the mids, and you kind of only really hear the highs. But with the menu here, you can bring in the lows, you can take out the mids, bring in the highs. Just depending how you want to do it or how you want to set it. Most of the time I just have the mids in there, which is cool. And so all that is just kind of like working as a filter, and you can kind of boost certain things, and it's great to like add variation on it. So that's Isolator. So moving on to the next one, we have DJFX Looper. And so DJFX Looper is actually one that's very popular, I would say, in like the lo-fi community, the hip hop community, because what it works as, it's basically looping whatever you have it on in short cycles, and you can affect the playback speed, the length of it, and yeah, basically just messing with it. So I'll give you an example. So that's on, so you can affect the length, the speed of it, and then the loop SW. So depending on like where you hit it, like a lot of times if you're doing some sort of performance, you can kind of give it like a stutter, like, and that's just like the loop SW is just to turn it off or on the effect. So like if you're just, you know, allowing it, let me speed it up a little bit. So it's like a cool little effect you kind of like can work with, like to transition through performances or transition through beats or stuff like that. It's pretty cool to do like a little performance. So I know that's very big in the lo-fi community, but that's one of my favorites that I love to mess with. All right, so the next effect that we have here, it's called scatter. And what scatter does, it swaps the sound played back by a loop in steps, altering its playback direction and gate length. And so it kind of can give you some sort of like a digital groove type of feeling. So let me play that. And to get to scatter, you're gonna hold this down, MFX, which is, I'm assuming, more effects. And it's the top one there that's highlighted, scatter. So it adds like kind of like a little randomizer So for scatter, as I turn that off, the options that you have for it are type, depth, scatter, and speed on the second menu. And what type does, it just basically gives you a variations of scatter. So let me turn it back on. And it's almost like a little randomizer that you can kind of mess around, see if maybe you like one of them. There's up to 10. And they all kind of randomize differently. Besides that, you have depth with just the depth of the scatter. So the higher, the more like scattering it feels. The lower, the more kind of like, sounds kind of cool. And then you have scatter, which is just basically this one just turning on and off the effect, kind of like DJFX Looper. So that's pretty cool. Then on the second menu, you have speed, which you can do single or double, and it just sets like how fast that scatter effect speed is. So it's set to double, I think, automatically, but you can send it to single if you don't want it as double as fast. That's scatter. The next option we have here is called downer, which all it does is just slows down the audio playback speed. To get to that, holding this down, you go to the next one over on the top row, which is right there. And then let me turn it off, but first play the beat. And then I'm gonna turn off downer. Just slowing it down. And with this option, you have depth, rate, filter, pitch, and resonance. Depth being control 1. 100 depth is like the full, it just it messes with the whole playback speed of it, of how slow you want it. So the higher it is, the slower it is. The more I go lower, it goes back to normal. 0 is normal, 100 is the full slowed down. Then the next option you have is rate, meaning like it sets the period at which the playback speed is changed. So let me set it to like 30. So just messing with the rate at which it's affected. The next option you have is filter. And so basically that's like, you know, it works the same way, attenuating in a high frequency range. So kind of hitting you with that filter there, and then slowly bring it back in. Then on the second menu, you have pitch and you have resonance. So with pitch, when it's turned on, pitches that were lowered due to the change in speed are converted to their original pitch, as it says here in the manual. So if like you mess with the pitch or anything, it'll go back to what it originally was. Resonance, just adjust the filter level resonance. So like, you know, increasing it will emphasize the effect more and create more of an unusual sound. You know, just kind of give it a different feel and vibe. But that's resonance, or excuse me, downer. All right, so the next effects we got here is called Ha-Dao. I think I'm pronouncing that right, hopefully. But it basically generates a wave-like sound based on the input audio. And so basically what that means is, let me see, I'm gonna start this audio. To get to Ha-Dao, you have to hold down MFX, and it's that third one that's highlighted right there. You'll see it at the top. And so as you can hear, let me turn myself up a little bit. So the options that you have with that is you have what's called mod depth, time, level, low cut, high, and pre-delay. Mod depth, which is control 1, just adjusts the depth of the effect sound. So if I turn it on, as you can hear, when you have it 100, it's like heavily on there, versus like going down, it kind of gives it like a very soft effect. Almost sounds like a, you know, just like a wavy sound. You have time, which is just the length of the effect. So if I have it to 0 versus going to 100, it sounds super crazy. Just the time of it. Then you have level, which adjusts the volume of the effect. So if I have it up, but if I have it set to 100, but if I go down to 0, it's like it's not even on. So you can mess with the level as far how much you want it kind of mixed in there with whatever you're running through it. The second menu you have here is low cut, high cut, and pre-delay, which low cut and high cut are just, you're setting a range at which you want the effect to hit. So, you know, you can start it, if you only want to focus the mids, you can, you know, focus those hertz. Or if you only want the low end, you can give it a type of filter and create it. The next option is called pre-delay, which of course, if you're familiar with any other type of plugins, pre-delay just sets the time it takes for the effect to hit whatever you're running through. So like 100 is a lot longer versus if I turn this to 0, hitting it immediately versus taking a little bit to hit. So that's the difference between those two. And that's hot down. All right, so the next effect we have here is called Kodama. And basically this just creates a reverberating audio effect. So the way to get to it is if you hold down MFX, it's that fourth one next in line. And the options you have are time, feedback, and send, as well as LDAMP, high damp, or mode. Excuse me, so let's play the beat. So what time does, of course, it's like you want to set how much the effect sound is delayed. So like, you know, how much of a delay, like if I want 1/16 or maybe like, let's go a little lower. Let's do 1/4. And the feedback is how much of the sound is repeated. The send is basically just the volume of the sound, or like, turn that feedback down. You know, just kind of like tweaking it and matching it to where you find something till you know that you're happy with. The next option, let me turn that send down, is LDAMP, HDAMP, and mode. And what LDAMP and HDAMP do, it's like another way to set the frequency range of whatever you want to hit that delay repeats. So like right here, it's set to 400. So that's a little bit from the low end into the mids all the way up to 500, which I just had it randomly set like that. So you can set it all the way down to like 80 or flat, or if not, go all the way to the 12,500, or if not, flat higher. So it just depends how you want to set it. Mode, what that is, it's just you have an option for single or pan, which if you set it to single, the effect sound comes from the center, so it feels like it's mono, versus pan, which is it's going to be heard more on the left and right. So it just depends on, like, you know, whatever you're running through it. But that's Kodama. So the next FX that we have here, it's called Zan-Zou, which what it does, it's for left and right sounds, this effect applies delay to the negative phase of the sound. It gives it kind of a lingering effect of like feeling like an after image, as they call it in the manual. The effect only works on stereo sounds, does not have any type of effect on mono. So here it's going to be in the second row right there, Zan-Zou. You have time, feedback, high filter, damp. And so you also have a second menu, which if I go back to it, you have level, mode, and sync. What time does, it sets the sound delay time. You know, if you want it to mess with it, you know, how much time you want onto it. Feedback, basically, of course, is before the amount of feedback that you're going to get on the effect. The HF damp, the high filter damp, what it does, it just sets frequency range like before in other effects, as to what you want focused in that after image. So like, let me actually play the beat and then turn on the effect. So it almost sounds like another version of a delay, as you see, depending on what you focus. And also like what's in the sound or sample or whatever you're running through it. The next menu, as I said, is level, which just messing with the volume of the effect sound. You have mode, which just sets how the effect lingers, which you have 2-tap, 3-tap, and 4-tap. And then you have sync, which can sync to the tempo of the beat, so it can synchronize it on time. And so you can turn that off or on. But that's Zan-Zou, excuse me. So the next effect we have here, it's called Toguro, which this effect, what it does here, it says that it's a sound, it gives the sound, whatever's running through it, an undulating effect. They call it, it's based like on the image of a coiled up snake, so to speak. So let me go to Togu, if I can spin this. Thank you. And so you have depth, rate, resonance, and then on the other side, you also have filter mode, amp mode, and sync. And so depth is going to adjust the playback speed, which should be slowed down. So 0. Affects it very little. Depth. Heavy depth going at 100 almost feels like it slows it down almost completely. The rate is basically setting the period at which the playback speed is lowered. So if I wanted to do 1/2 versus going to 2:1. 1:1. So it kind of slows down, then revs back up, then slows down, and it kind of gives it that effect. Resonance is basically, of course, going to mess with the filter's resonance level. And so the more that you increase it, the more that it gives it an unusual sound. So let me actually go to 1:1. And then on the other side, of course, as I said before, filter mode, amp mode, sync. Filter mode, it's another way to like mess with the high frequency range of what you want to affect. So, you know, just give it that different type of vibe. Amp mode, it just attenuates the volume according to the playback speed. And then sync is just another, like before, where it synchronizes. It can synchronize with the tempo if you take it off. Doesn't really matter. So it kind of goes in and out with that, but if you sync it on. So yeah. But that's Togu. The next effect we have here is called SBF, which just stands for sideband filter. It lets you, it lets specific frequency components pass through. So that's the third one here. And you have interval, width, balance, which interval, what it does, it just sets the band interval. And so like the larger the value is in here, the more wider the band intervals are and the frequency at which each band increases. So that's with the 50%. Now with this, it sets the bandwidth. So kind of messing that, trying to find a balance of what you think sounds cool. You know, so the width is going to open it more versus like narrowing it. Balance basically works like a mix knob. So like 100% is like the full effect, but then you take it to 100, it's no effect. So that's pretty cool. It's kind of like a mix knob. On the other side, you have type and gain, which of course gain is just adjusting the volume of the effect. Type sets the range at which the filter works. So you have just different types. You have sideband filter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and they all kind of have their own different variations of the filter. But that is sideband filter, or SBF, as it's in the SP404. All right, so the next effect that we have here is called stopper, and basically, if you think of a DJ slowing down a record, it's that same effect that, you know, countless producers have used. It's a common effect in a lot of things. So stopper is right there, the fourth one in that second row. Let me turn it off and let me play the beat. And then I'm going to give the example. Here's it turned on. It automatically stopped because of the depth at which it was at. So if I mess with the depth, let me turn it off. Oh, sorry, maybe it was the rate. But you have the options for depth. Let me do rate. Which 1:1, as you can hear, it just slows it down a little bit. Versus, let me do 1/4. That's a little bit quicker. But the depth in this menu, it adjusts the playback speed at which it's slowed down. You have rate, which is just setting the period at which the rate starts to change of that speed. Resonance is adjusting the filter level. So let me turn it up a little bit. Back on. And then the second menu, you have filter mode and amp mode, which of course, as we said in other FX, filter mode attenuates certain frequencies according to the playback speed, and then amp mode lowers the volume according to the playback speed. So it just depends. But stopper's like a cool little effect that you can kind of like mess with to, you know, do small transitions, and if you're doing a performance or anything like that. So that's stopper. The next effect that we have here is tape echo, which is the first one in the third row. And tape echo, as it sounds, basically is just an effect that gives an echo effect. It's supposed to, they say here, it's like kind of like a realistic tape delay sound. It's supposed to emulate the Roland RE201 space echo, but think of it as another type of delay. So let me play the beat, and I'm just going to turn it on. So it's just basically like another type of delay. The options you have for it are time, which is just gonna, you know, set the speed at which the delay happens, that echo. You have feedback, which messes with the volume. So you can mess with that, kind of give it a wavy sound. You have the levels, which messes with the how much you hear of it. So regardless of what I'm doing over here, if the level's not up, I'm not gonna hear it. As you can hear it there. Then on the second menu, you have mode, WF rate, and WF depth, which mode is just, it's a combination of playback heads to use. So like different variations of type of echo effects. The WF rate just sets, WF stands for wow and flutter. If you ever had like the plugin RC20 or any other type of like lo-fi type of filter, it can mess with the wow and flutter of it. Same thing with the depth. The rate messes with how much of it gives it that tape wear, and then the depth is just the depth of it. So if I mess with, like, it's set to 100, let me go down to 0, turn this up. So cool little effect, cool little thing to throw in there, whatever you're doing. But that's tape echo. Another effect that we have here is called TimeCtrlDelay, and that is the second one in the third row there. And basically the options you have are time delay, feedback level, and then on the second menu, LDAMP, HDAMP, sync. And so what time delay does, I mean, it's in the name, TimeCtrlDelay. It's just basically another sort of delay that you can use. So let me turn it off, play the beat. Let me actually do this one. And of course you have, like I said, time is messing with the sound of the delay time, the feedback, the amount of feedback you're going to get, the level is the volume of the effect, and then the LDAMP and HDAMP are basically just, you know, the frequency range at which you want that effect, the delay repeats to hit, you know, or emphasize, I should say. Another cool little thing to make just more wavy effects, you know. But that's TimeCtrlDelay. The next effect that we have here is called super filter. And all that is just another type of filter, kind of like filter plus overdrive, but it's like it's specifically for filtering. So that's the third one right here. And if I turn it off, play the beat, another type of filter. The options that you have here are cutoff. It's just going to set the range at which the filter works. Resonance, of course, the filter's level. So then you have filter type. You can have a high pass filter, a band pass filter, and a low pass filter, and they kind of add their own different type of effect to it. The second menu, you have depth, rate, and sync, which of course, depth is just the depth of the effect. Rate, once again, the cycle, the effect, the cycle period time of the effect, and then sync if you want it to synchronize with that tempo. So another cool little filter delay that you can explore and mess with. So the next effect is actually one of my favorites that I actually really enjoy a lot, just because I usually add it to like everything when I'm making a beat, but it's the warm saturator effect, which is the last one in that third row right there. And what it does is it's just saturating, adding kind of like a warm sound to whatever you're running through the effect, or whatever, you know, is in that effect. So let me turn it off, turn it on. And the options you have are drive, and then you have EQ low, which is just basically let me go back a little bit. Drive is just adjusting the strength of the distortion, so you can give it a lot, you can give it none, kind of like try to find a happy medium with that. EQ low, it's basically adjusting either by boosting or cutting the low end. So if I take the lows out, -24 to the lowest, you can't hear the low ends that much. But if you boost it, you can definitely, you hear the emphasizing of it. And the same thing with EQ high. I'm gonna take the highs out or boost them. And then on the other side is just level, which is just the, you know, how much of volume of the effect. So there's that. But I love that one just because, you know, if you have beats and you want to kind of make them hit a little bit more, give it that warm sound, warm saturator is perfect for it. Moving on from warm saturator, the next one that I love is 303 vinyl simulation, which is just simulating a 303 vinyl from the SP404, and it's just basically simulating the sound of an analog record playing. So the options you have are compression, noise, wow flutter, and level. Which compression, if you're familiar with production, basically trying to bring the loudest part of a sound, whatever's running through it, and the lowest part to a happy medium, so that way they're both heard as close as possible on an equal level. Noise, of course, I mean, if you can hear that, I might boost it in the edit, but just hearing some like noises, some artifacts in there. Wow flutter, which is, you know, let me run, messing with wow and flutter, and so how much you want that effect on there. And then level is just how much the volume of the effect sound of how much you want to hear it compared to the dry signal. So if I mess with this, or no, I'm sorry, it's just the level of that effect. I apologize. So that's pretty cool. Sometimes I'll throw that on a beat if I want to give it that analog record sound, which brings us also to the next effect, which is another vinyl simulator, but this one is from the 404 vinyl simulator. So this is coming from the SP404 SX, and basically another vinyl simulator that just simulates an analog record playing. So on this one, the difference between 303 and the 404 vinyl sim is that the 404, you have just frequency, noise, and wow flutter. On the 303, you have that compressor, and the level of the sound effect. So this is like the frequency. Turn that noise down. So the frequency, of course, just messing with like whatever you're running through with the frequency range. Noise, of course, is noise, and then the wow flutter, how much wow and flutter you want. So that's 404 vinyl sim. The next simulator in this FX series is Casette Simulator, which is another favorite of mine. This is like very heavily used in some of my beats or like sample loops or whatever I create, which is, the name suggests, Casette Sim. It's just simulating the sound of a cassette playing. You know, we had the analog record, now we have the cassette playing effect, which is that third one right there. So I'm gonna play the beat again. And on this one's a little different than the other simulators. You have tone, hiss, age, and on the second menu, you have drive, wow, flutter, and catch. Tone is just setting the tone of the simulator. You know, kind of like where you want to set it. Then hiss, of course, is just adjusting the noise. Age is how like deterioration of the cassette, because it's a simulated cassette. So like the more, it's gonna sound like it's like an older sounding cassette player. The next one, drive, which is just gonna mess with distortion. Wow flutter, as said before, it's just for wow and fluttered of how much you want to hear. And then catch sets how much cassette tape has stretched out. So if we turn that effect off, kind of just messes with the playback of it, you know, in that effect. But that's Casette Sim. And going right into the next effect, we have what's called Lo-Fi, which is that last one in that menu. And what you have here are pre-filter, Lo-Fi type, tone, and on the second menu, cutoff, balance, and level. And basically, pre-filter just sets the type of sets the type of pre-filter for the sound that passes through before the effect is applied. So let me turn it off. It just has like 6 different variations that you can mess with to see if you like either of them. Lo-Fi type, what that is, it's just setting for like the tonal degradation, because of course with with lo-fi, it's very like much of a degraded type of sound for the genre. It's 1, 9. Tone is basically setting a frequency range in which the post filter how it works. So like you can see that's a little bit more on the high, or no, I'm sorry, on the I apologize. The tone basically messes with the tone of the effect. This is going more towards the low end. This is going more towards the high end. And so it's kind of like setting a range, so to speak, of what's emphasized. Then on the second menu, cutoff is just setting the frequency range for the post filter. The balance is basically like a mix knob, which you have 100 to 0, and then you have 0 to 100, and then level is just the sound of the effect. 100 full level, nothing. So that's lo-fi. Love that effect. I recommend it definitely if you're making like lo-fi records or anything like that. All right, so going into the next effect that we have here, of course, it is in the second menu, which there's a second page. The first one is Reverb. Reverb is kind of self-explanatory, just adding reverberation to whatever you run through it. The menu options you have are type, time, level, and the second menu is low cut, high cut, pre-delay. So if you ever used any type of reverb plugin in your DAW or whatever you use to create, you're pretty familiar with this. And this is just an option. So the type is just basically different types of reverberation. So you have ambient, room, hall 1, hall 2, and they all have different like just sounding reverbs. Time is basically messing with the reverb time of how long you want it to reverberate. 100 is going to be longer versus 0. It's going to be very quick and short. Level, of course, the volume of the effect. Then in the second menu, low cut and high cut are just frequency ranges at which you want attenuated. What's the focus for that reverb? And then pre-delay, as we said in a previous effect, it sets the time before the effect actually is heard. So a quick pre-delay means that it's just going to hit almost immediately. The longer the pre-delay, the longer it takes. As you can hear that, versus you hear it immediately. So that's reverb. Pretty self-explanatory, but also pretty cool that it's in here. Going into the next effect that we have here, chorus, which is right there, the second one next to reverb. And chorus is just adding, if you ever heard chorus, it's just basically adding like some space and richness to whatever you run through it. The menu options you have are depth, rate, balance, EQ low, EQ high, and level. And so let me turn it off and play this beat. So it kind of gives it, you know, a different type of vibe. Depth, messing with the depth of the sound. 100 affecting it way more than 0. Rate is just going to set the cycle at which the effect, the period of the cycle. And then balance works just like a mix knob, which you're mixing the dry and wet signal. So 100 to 0 is going to be no effect versus 0 to 100 is like the full effect of it. And then on the other side, EQ low and EQ high are basically like in a previous effect where the EQ low, you can either boost or cut the low frequencies. EQ high, it works the same. You either boost or cut the high frequencies. And then level is just the volume of the effect sound. That's all it is. but pretty cool. Chorus is dope. The next one, another chorus in this list, is the Juno Chorus. What's different about this one is just modeled after it models the chorus after the Roland Juno 106 and the JX series. So that basically, this effect is going to work similarly to chorus itself, but this one's just modeled after that specific model. So if I turn it off, and the difference between the two is this one has the menu, is mode, noise, and balance, which mode is just giving you different types of chorus. So you have Juno 1, 2, 1, 2, 12, JX11, JX12, kind of like variations of those models, of those Roland Junos that it's modeled after. Then you have noise and balance. Basically balance working like the mix knob. So you can like create some like cool sounds and run through things here just by finding, you know, a cool little balance that you might like. But that's the Juno Chorus. So from there, the next option is probably another effect that everybody's mostly familiar with, unless you're like barely getting into production. It's Flanger, and that is right there, the fourth one on the list. And Flanger is just creating like this modulation type of effect that sounds like an airplane taking off or like landing, something like that. So let me just do the sample. And for these options, this is the effect. You have depth, rate, manual, and then you have second menu, resonance, balance, and sync, which once again, depth, it's the depth of the effect sound. The rate, just the period at which the effects takes place. Manual, when it's applied, it's just it's basically a frequency range. So smaller values reduce the flanging effect in the low end. So it'll hit more of the high end if you're lower versus if you're higher up. Resonance is another one, messing with the filter's resonance level. Balance works like a mix knob versus a dry and wet signal. And then sync is another one like before, where you can sync it to a tempo or you can take it off and not have it synced. So up to you. But that's Flanger. Another effect that I would say a lot of people are probably pretty familiar with, phaser, which is the next one right there. First one in the second row of the second effects right there. And phaser, of course, is just creating modulation by adding a phase shifted sound. So what does that sound like? Let's see. So for this effect, you have depth, rate, manual, resonance, balance, and sync, all like the previous effect. So depth, messing with the effect of the sound, rate, manual, setting the frequency range at which it's applied. Then the next menu, resonance, balance, and sync. Same thing, resonance, messing with that filter's resonance level. Balance, basically think of it as a mix knob. And sync, if you want to sync it on time or if you want to take it off tempo. So give it like a little wavy space sound. But that's phaser. The next effect that we have here is called wah, kind of like a wah-wah. And basically just, it basically gives you that wah-wah sound to whatever you run through it. So wah is right there. And let's play it. Just that little going in and out wah-wah sound. For this menu, you have peak, rate, manual, depth, filter type, and sync. Peak is just narrowing the frequency range. So the larger it is, the more narrow the frequency range is versus compared to lower. As you can hear the difference there. Rate, once again, just sets the cycle of the effect. Manual, the range at which the effect is applied. Then, of course, the other one, depth of the effect. Filter type, you have low pass filter and bypass filter. And so low pass filter, it's going to be over a wide frequency range versus a narrow with bypass filter. And then, of course, again, sync, if you want to sync it with the tempo or not. But that's wah. All right, so the next effect that we have here is called slicer. And so what it does, it takes the sound and it basically sounds like it's slicing it up to a bunch of small pieces, and it kind of creates almost like a backing phrase that's being played. So this will be the third one in the second row. And let me play the beat. You can kind of hear it right there. So the options for this, you have pattern, speed, depth, and then the second menu is shuffle, mode, and sync. And so pattern is just like, it's a bunch of variations of presets for like the types of patterns. So like if you listen, it's just different types of sequence patterns. Speed is gonna basically, you know, sets the period over which the secret pattern, or excuse me, the sequence pattern repeats. This is 1-to-1 versus 1/64th T. Can't really hear it all too much. This one you can hear a little bit more. Depth sets the slicing depth of just basically the more higher it is on depth, the more you'll be able to hear the slicer effect. So if I turn it to 0, can't really hear it, but now you hear it more. And then going to the second menu, you have shuffle, mode, and sync. And what shuffle is just the settings for the delay of timing of even numbered steps. So like if I turn this, let me turn this up. Kind of just messing with that. And then mode, this is going to set how the volume changes with the next step sounds. So legato means that the volume's not changed between steps, versus slash, the volume is reset to 0 before the next sound comes in. So versus, so you can kind of hear the difference a little bit. And then of course, sync is another, once again, if you want to sync it with the tempo or not. But there's that. There's slicer. So the next effect that we have here is tremelo / pan, another effect that I think we'd all be familiar with, and it just messes with the volume and the panning of something. So if I turn it off, in this menu option you have depth, rate, type, wave, and sync. And depth of it is the depth of the effect. As you can hear with this effect, it's going left to right if you have headphones on, but the lower the depth, the less of the effect you hear. Rate is just, once again, setting the cycle of the effect. The third option for type, you go between TRE, which is tremelo, and then pan, which is pan. So like this, so if this is gonna mess more with the pan when you're on pan mode versus tremelo mode. So like if I turn the depth up, and then if I go to pan, it's gonna mess with the pan. So there's that. In the second menu, wave and sync. Of course, sync is with messing if you want to turn on with the tempo. Wave, what it does, it sets how the effect modulates the sound. So you have let's go to the beginning, a triangle wave, a square wave, a sine wave, a sawtooth wave, another one, and then also a trapezoidal wave. And so they all kind of give it a different type of feeling. So like if I go to trapezoidal, it just gives it a different type of vibe to it. But that's tremelo and pan. All right, so the next effect that we have here is called Chromatic PS, which is just a 2-voice pitch shifter that changes the pitch in a semitone step. So that's going to be let me go here, the first one in the third column here of the second menu. And you basically, like I said, it just kind of is a 2-voice pitch shifter. So the menu that you have for this is pitch 1, pitch 2, balance. And then on the second one, you have pan 1, pan 2. So pitch 1 and pitch 2, what they do, they adjust the amount that pitch 1 or pitch 2 is pitch shifted. So you can go between -24 semitones up to 12, and same thing with pitch 2. And then the balance, think of it as a mixing knob, which is going to mess between the dry and wet signal. And then going to the second menu, pan 1 and pan 2 is just setting the panning of each pitch. So like if you want it in the center, which is C right there, you can mess with that. Or if you want to mess with it, go to the left, or if not, go to the right, or leave it in the middle right there. So if we turn that on, and then let me go to the second menu. So it's just messing with the pitch of stuff. But that's chromatic pitch shifter. The next effect that we have here is called Hyper Reso, which is just, it's a resonator effect that adjusts to making, creating like melodies and bass lines easier. And so that one is going to be the second one in that third menu on this, in the third row on the second menu. And the options you have for this are note, spread, character, scale, feedback, and envelope mode. Which note is just going to set which tone in the chromatic scale should resonate, counting from the root of the scale value. So you can go from -17 all the way to 18. And then let's see, let's turn it on first. Okay, if I go up. And then you have spread, which spread, it just sets the octave of the resonator. You have unison, tiny, small, medium, and huge. And then you have character, which is just the brightness and detuning of the sound. So if we mess with that, you can hear the difference there. The next menu, scale, just sets the composite notes to resonate. So you can do C major to B major and C minor to B minor. Feedback, of course, it's going to adjust the amount of feedback you get from the effect. And then envelope mode increases the amount of feedback according to the input level. So that is Hyper Resonator. The next effect that we have here is called Ring Mod, which can be found right next to that. And that's right there. What this does, it just alters the tonal character to make the sound more metallic. So if I play this, you can kind of hear it already. If I turn it off, go back, turn it on. The menu options you have are frequency, you have sends, balance, and then the second menu you have polarity, EQ low, EQ high. Frequency sets the range at which the effect is applied, where exactly you want it to hit. Send is the volume of the effect sound. Balance is going to be your mix knob, basically between your dry and wet signal. 100 0 no effect, 0 to 100 full effect. The next menu, polarity, is going to be the direction in which the frequency modulation moves. So you can turn it off, or if I turn it on, and then EQ low and EQ high, kind of like a previous effect, just mess with either boosting or cutting the low frequency or the high frequency. So if I take out the lows, it's not really in there versus boosting it. Same thing with the highs. So it just depends how you want to mess with it. But that is Ring Mod. And then the next effect we have here in that same line is called Crusher. And what Crusher does, it produces kind of like a lo-fi effect. And how that sounds is like this. When you only have 3 options for this one, you have filter, rate, and balance. So filter is just going to mess with the frequency range of the pre-filter. Rate is going to mesh with the sample rate of the effect. You can hear that's at 100. You can hear there. And balance, once again, is going to mess with the dry and wet signal. So 0 to 100 is the full effect. 1 to 100, or excuse me, 100 to 0, no effect. Pretty cool. That is Crusher. All right, so the next effect that we're moving on to is Overdrive, which is in the last row of the second menu in MFX. And this is basically just distorting. It just mildly distorts whatever you run through it. So if I just run this sample through, you have drive, which is just the amount of distortion. Tone, which just sets the tone. The larger the tone, the higher emphasis on the high frequency range. The smaller, the more on the low end. So if you go into the negatives, it's going to affect the low end more. Balance is going to be, of course, the mix knob again. And then on the other side, you only have level, which is just the volume of the effect sound. So pretty simple overdrive, pretty cool. Then the next option in that row we have is distortion, which of course, if you've noticed, distortion is been applied into previous effects that we've went over. This one is just another one that intensely distorts the sound. So play that sample. We're on distort. The menu you have for this is drive. Then you have tone. Balance. And then on the other side, level, just like the previous overdrive. So this is more focused a little bit, I'd say. It's just another distortion, but pretty cool if you want to use it. The next one is another one that I think is actually pretty cool, and like I tend to use it on a lot of beats that I used, and that's Equalizer, which is the third one in the last row there. And of course, if you've messed with an EQ, this is basically an EQ on a simpler way to use it. And so let me turn it off, turn it on. Of course, once it's on, you don't hear anything until you make adjustments. So the options you have are low gain, mid gain, high gain. Then you have low frequency, mid frequency, and high frequency. And of course, as we've learned in the previous effects that have low gain, high gain, this one also has mid gain. That's all that doing in that first menu is either boosting or cutting for that frequency range. And then the other side, low frequency and mid frequency and high frequency, you're just setting the range for each one. So you can set for the low frequency, the mids, and the highs. And you're just EQing, that's all you're doing. So you can apply that whatever you run through it. So that's EQ. The next effect that we have in there is the last one in that, which is compressor, which this is just a simple, like I said earlier before, that compressor is just taking the the loudest part of a sound and the lowest and trying to bring it together so that way it sounds more even. And so just trying to smooth it out. In compressor, of course, if I turn it off, sustain, you have sustain, attack, ratio, and then level on the other side. Sustain is just going to set how long the effect is applied to the decaying sound. Attack is going to set how long it takes to reduce the volume when a high input level is detected. Basically whenever a high is detected. Ratio, it's going to set the compression ratio. So you can just hear the difference between 0 versus, and so that's the ratio. Then the level, once again, is just going to adjust the volume of the effect. So just compressor on its own, if you want to just not have to use it amongst another effect. This is the compressor by itself. All right, moving into the last couple of effects that we have here. This one is another reverb. It's called the SX reverb, which is modeled after the SP404 SX. And so it's just another reverb. So if I go in here, it's in the third menu, the first one right there. And basically you have time, tone, balance, and then just that one menu. And so let me, as you can hear there, that's with the effect. That's without the effect. From the menu, time, of course, mess with the reverb time. So the lower, how quicker the reverb is to end versus 100 being the longest. Tone is going to mess with the tonal character of the reverb. Balance is going to be your mix knob between the dry and the wet signal. So that's SX reverb. Then going into the next one right after it, it is SX delay, which SX delay, just like the name, it gives an echo effect in sync with the tempo. And so this is another one that kind of is modeled after what was in the SP404 SX. And so it's that second one right next to it in the third menu. As you can hear there's that delay going. The options you have are time, feedback, and balance, which time is just messing with the sound of the delay time. Feedback is how much the amount of feedback you're getting in the effect. Balance is your mix knob between the dry and wet sound. And that's SX delay. Then the next option in here is cloud delay, another delay. This one adds multiple delays to the dry sound as well as reverberations for like a thick type of effect. So it's right there, that third one in the first row. And so the options that you have in here are window, pitch, balance, and on the second menu you have feedback, cloudy, and lo-fi. As you can hear, it kind of is adding like this very interesting reverberation and delay effect on there. So what window does is it adjusts the interval for the delayed sounds. So the larger the sound, it's going to produce a deeper reverberation. Pitch is going to mess with the volume of the pitch shifter for the effect. So if I turn this down, as you can hear, not too much of a reverberation, but if I turn it up for window, you can hear that delay in there more. Balance, of course, is your mix knob between the dry and wet sound. Feedback, of course, is the amount of feedback for the effect. Cloudy is going to adjust the thickness of the effect. So if I go over here, as you can hear that this is at 100, going down, this is 0. Then, of course, lo-fi, which is going to be like a tonal effect, which kind of degrades the sound. So that's another cool one, cloud delay, but that's cloud delay. And then the next effect here that we have here that we can see is backspin, which of course backspin just gives the effect of a spinning record backwards. And that is the very last one right there. And let's see, let me turn it off. As you can hear there, that's the on. Turn it off. So length sets the length of the backspin. Speed is going to set the speed of the backspin, and then back SW is just basically turning on and off the effect. There you go, right there. But that's backspin. All right, everybody. One of the last things that I want to talk about in here is basically messing with the settings of like FX. For example, if I wanted to change these that I have up here, these 3, 4, 5 that I have as far as what I wanted to be kind of like my regularly used effects, there's a way to do that. So a way to do that is by holding down Shift and go to Effects Settings. And here you're going to find the first menu option you have are favorites, which you can create a favorite set of like effects that you can just turn on and basically hit whatever you're running through it. So like on here I have this is bus 1 and bus 2, they're stacked on each other, which what that means is that whatever effects I have on bus 1 and bus 2 are going to hit that sound at the same time. They're going to be used at the same time. But if I were to, let me see if I can, how do I change this? No, go back. There it is. So if you click enter, you mess with how the effects are applied. So if you do it this way where they're kind of lined up across, what'll happen is whatever's on bus 1, if you're on bus 1 in the bus effects, is what'll be applied, but bus 2 will not. And if you wanted to stack bus 1 and bus 2, meaning that whatever effects on each bus, you can stack them, and then you'll have 3 and 4, which are down here as they read bypass. But like if I scroll through, you have presets of like this one is Reverb and 303 Vinylsim. This one's Warm Saturator and Vinylsim, Equalizer, Warm Saturator. But basically, you can go through a little bit to eventually get to a point where it says, if I keep going, bypass, which you can change and set favorites of yours that you want to leave there as a preset. So like, for example, if I go here with the third controller, you can go over to bus 3, and you see it says bypass. To click it, you're just going to hit enter, and it's highlighted, and you can go through the simulations and mess with the settings of each effects if you want to. Like if I wanted to set downer, and then let's say I'm good with those settings, go over to bus 4, do the same thing, this one I want lo-fi, and then I'm click enter to be done. And if I go back, there it is, downer and lo-fi is a part of that chain for whenever I turn on the bus and the input effects, if I want it on there. And so you can mess with it, and you have a bunch of different presets that you can use if you want to use them. And so that's an option that you want to do. I wanted to let y'all know, just like you want to stack effects, or if you want to use one effect, this is the way you do it. If you want to stack bus 1 and bus 2, that's how you do it with 3 and 4. Also, sorry to answer the original question, kind of rambled there. If I wanted to change one of these into a different effect and just have it be like that, if going back when you're at the effect settings here, if you scroll over past 3 and bus 4, you're going to get to direct, which direct has to deal with all of these right here. So if, let's say I don't like Resonator, if you click it, it highlights it. I can go through here and choose which effect I want to change it to as a preset. So that way, when I turn it on, I don't have to go through a menu or anything like that in order to use the effect. But that's if you want to do that. You can go through the whole list and just kind of like pick one that you want to run through. So that way you can have it just ready to go. And then once you're done, you just click enter again. Do the same with delay, isolation, and DJFX Looper. So that's if you want to change it, but that's like a pretty cool option. And then you have this other menu, which deals with like mute bus. You also have input effects, which down here at the input, you can do things such as auto pitch, which just processes it, and it's like a auto pitch of your voice, a vocoder, and you can also do harmony. Of course, you have guitar amps, and those are like some of the effects that you have there. And then, yeah, and so that's just basically how, if you want to do that, you can do that. Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this video. Hopefully you were able to get some knowledge out of this into the effects and just get a deeper understanding of it. I know I didn't go into the input effects on the voice. I know I just kind of like described them, as well as like the guitar amp that you can do when you do plug in. But I can go deeper into that if y'all like, just to give you all an example. If you like, just let me know in the comments. Please make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon to be notified of future videos. I'll do a little bit more, a couple more videos with the SP404, or if you all have a question, please drop it in the comments below, and I'd be happy to do a video just to kind of enrich everyone, so that way they just know a little bit more about their machine. And or maybe I'll even do a couple performance sets, but we'll see. But other than that, thank you for tuning in. Please follow me on social media. Everything's in the about the video section, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.